Hey guys, tonight we wander into the soft silver glow of a Persian garden at moonrise, where the scent of jasmine drifts lazily through the warm night air, and the leaves glisten with dew like scattered stars. You trudge along narrow pathways of carefully laid stones, barefoot perhaps, feeling the cool earth beneath your toes. And you probably won't survive a day here if you tried to water these plants in the scorching sun. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not drop your location and local time in the comments? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The practice of watering Persian gardens at moonrise wasn't just a quirky habit, it was a deeply practical choice. Daytime temperatures in much of Persia, particularly in the central plateau regions, could soar above 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the long summer months. Watering plants under such extreme heat would evaporate most of the moisture before roots could absorb it, leaving gardeners frustrated and thirsty, and their plants even thirstier. Imagine pouring a bucket of water over a thirsty rose, only to watch it vanish into thin air within minutes. This is where the night offered a reprieve, a natural cooling period that allowed the water to seep deeply and nourish roots properly. Historians still argue whether moonlight itself had any tangible effect on plant health, or if it was just a poetic excuse for avoiding blistering days. But there's more to it than practicality. Persian gardeners noticed that plants were far less stressed under moonlit skies. The gentle luminescence seemed to calm sensitive flowers like tulips and hyacinths, while vines unfurled slowly, as if luxuriating in the cooler, calmer night. Some researchers suggest that even minimal nighttime photosynthesis, or whatever traces of it the plants might have carried out, could be enhanced by cooler, more stable temperatures. Fringe tidbits tell us that gardeners believed the plants could feel the moon, a notion that modern science chuckles at, yet it persisted in folklore and poetry for centuries. Imagine standing among roses, hearing the soft splash of water in stone channels, and sensing that each droplet carries a whisper from the sky above. Desert heat wasn't the only factor guiding these nocturnal routines. Water itself was precious, sourced from qanats, underground channels that drew water from distant mountains. Watering in the night minimized waste, reducing evaporation loss dramatically. Clay jugs and small copper buckets were delicately balanced along narrow pathways so that each plant received just enough moisture without flooding the soil. You might imagine a gardener tiptoeing to avoid stepping on the patterned tiles, worried about spilling a precious drop. Historians still debate whether these methods were engineered for maximum efficiency or whether they were influenced equally by ritual and aesthetic preference. And speaking of ritual, moonrise held a subtle psychological charm. Gardeners often timed their work with specific phases of the moon, believing that the waxing or waning light affected plant vitality. Some claimed that planting or watering under a crescent moon would encourage faster growth, though such claims teeter on the edge between observation and poetic fancy. Fringe anecdotes suggest that they even whispered encouragement to the seedlings, a precursor perhaps to our modern fascination with talking to plants. You can imagine them wandering the garden, murmuring soft phrases under silver light, carefully avoiding puddles that reflected a miniature night sky. By the time the first sections of stars began to fade, and the moon cast long, delicate shadows across the courtyard, a subtle rhythm had taken hold. The air was cooler, fragrances more pronounced, and the once stressed plants seemed to sigh in relief under attentive care. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, the Persian gardeners didn't need anything so bizarre. They had the moon as their natural shield against the sun's fury, and the soft night breeze as a gentle helper. And as you stand there imagining this scene, you begin to understand that moonrise watering wasn't just about hydration. It was about rhythm, observation, and a profound sensitivity to the living world around them. The techniques Persian gardeners employed under the moonlight were both elegant and surprisingly practical. You follow along the narrow stone channels that snake across the garden like silver ribbons, the gentle gurgle of water keeping time with your footsteps. Buckets of clay, sometimes etched with delicate patterns, were lowered into these channels to carry precious water from qanats to every thirsty plant. Unlike today's high-pressure hoses or sprinklers, these tools required patience and precision. One false tilt and a rosebush could be drowned or a patch of herbs left dry. Historians still argue whether these methods were truly optimized for maximum hydration or whether aesthetic considerations guided much of the design. Some of the methods seem quirky to the modern eye. Gardeners would often sprinkle water using their fingers in a soft, rhythmic motion, believing it soothed the plants much like a lullaby soothes a restless child. Others poured water through perforated clay vessels that released droplets slowly, mimicking rainfall. You can almost picture a gardener leaning over a fountain, water trickling like silver threads into a mosaic basin, whispering encouragement to each leaf. Fringe tidbits suggest that moonlight amplified the magic of these rituals, though again, it's difficult to separate poetic license from horticultural science. Secret schedules were another layer of their nocturnal choreography. The timing of watering was often dictated by subtle cues, the angle of the moon in the sky, the appearance of certain stars, or even the dew settling on the tiles. Gardeners developed almost military precision, tracking lunar cycles to align watering, pruning, and planting. Waxing moons were associated with new growth, while waning moons were linked to strengthening roots. Some historians propose that these schedules were practical responses to the desert environment, while others argue that they reflected a symbolic or spiritual understanding of nature. Either way, the discipline required was staggering. You had to be awake, alert, and gentle, all while the garden slept under the moon's gaze. Water conservation was central to these rituals. With limited water sources, any waste could be catastrophic. Clay pipes and channels were meticulously maintained, cleaned, and adjusted to ensure every drop reached its target. You might imagine the gardeners measuring each irrigation session like a scientist, balancing their movements with the sound of flowing water and the faint shimmer of moonlight on polished stones. Some records even suggest that they timed water flow to the temperature drop, allowing the coolest hours to ensure the least evaporation. A bit of ancient engineering genius hidden in plain sight. And yet, there was room for debate. Did moonlight itself have an effect on water absorption, or was it merely a matter of cooler temperatures and careful technique? Scholars have proposed everything from lunar gravity affecting soil moisture to the moon's reflection influencing plant metabolism. While evidence remains speculative, what's undeniable is that Persian gardeners achieved a harmonious balance between science, art, and a touch of mysticism. They worked with patience, reverence, and a sense of rhythm that modern gardeners rarely experience, an orchestration of human effort, water, and night's gentle embrace. By the time the moon reached its zenith, the garden was a living, breathing mosaic of dew-kissed leaves, fragrant blossoms, and carefully irrigated soil. Every channel, jug, and fingerful of water contributed to a subtle dance that lasted centuries, shaping not only plants, but the very culture and aesthetics of Persian horticulture. And you, standing quietly amid the fragrant, moonlit foliage, begin to sense the care, precision, and poetry woven into each nightly ritual. Realizing that these nocturnal gardeners were not merely watering plants, they were orchestrating life itself under a silver sky. As you wander deeper into the moonlit garden, you start noticing the sensory tapestry that surrounds you. The cool night air carries a mix of fragrances, the sharp sweetness of roses, the musky hint of jasmine, and the earthy undertone of damp soil. Every footstep produces a faint crunch against gravel paths, and the soft splash of water in channels creates a gentle rhythm, like nature's own lullaby. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on sensory pleasure was purely aesthetic or if it contributed to plant health, but there's no denying that Persian gardeners cultivated an environment for all senses, not just for survival. The moon's glow doesn't just guide movement, it casts long, delicate shadows that make ordinary leaves appear as delicate silhouettes, turning the garden into a living painting. Some scholars suggest that the reflective qualities of water and silvered tiles enhanced this effect, making the space appear larger and more serene than it actually was. Fringe stories whisper of gardeners believing that plants could sense the moonlight, perhaps even bending slightly in response, though this is more poetic than scientific. You can almost imagine a vine slowly unfurling under the lunar caress, a scene so cinematic it would make any modern gardener swoon. Cultural symbolism permeated the practice of moonrise watering. The moon often represented guidance, purity, and reflection in Persian literature and art. By tending to gardens under its soft glow, gardeners were engaging in a subtle form of meditation, aligning human labor with celestial rhythms. There's a scholarly debate over whether this ritual had spiritual implications or if it was simply a practical method cloaked in poetic language. Either way, working in the moonlight was an intimate experience, a quiet conversation between human hands and the natural world, a momentary pause from the harshness of daytime life. Among these poetic practices were fringe folk tales, some humorous, some earnest. Gardeners whispered that certain plants thrived only under moonlight, or that a full moon could accelerate root growth, while a waning moon would slow flowering. While modern science largely discounts these beliefs, they illustrate the blending of observation and imagination that defined Persian horticulture. Imagine tiptoeing past a small fountain, hearing the water ripple over tiles that glint like scattered stardust, and feeling the faint tickle of dew on your bare arms, as if the night itself were participating in the ritual. The sensory experience of moonrise watering extended to touch as well. Gardeners carefully adjusted soil with gloved hands, ensuring the right firmness and moisture levels. Leaves were gently tested for hydration, and petals were nudged to spread open without bruising. Some plants, particularly exotic orchids or delicate roses, demanded near-surgical precision. You begin to sense that every action, no matter how small, required an intimate knowledge of both the plant and the night's temperament. Historians still debate whether such meticulous care was widespread or confined to elite gardens, but either way, the combination of moonlight, water, and human attention created a living symphony that delighted all the senses and embodied a poetic philosophy rarely found in modern gardening. As the seasons shift, so too does the rhythm of the moonlit garden. You notice that winter nights bring a biting chill, prompting gardeners to water sparingly, careful not to freeze delicate roots. Summer nights, by contrast, offer a warm embrace, allowing more generous irrigation and longer strolls among the fragrant blooms. Seasonal adjustments weren't just about temperature, they reflected a deep understanding of plant cycles, with flowering, fruiting, and dormancy all influencing when and how water was applied. Historians still argue whether seasonal timing was codified in manuals or passed purely through oral tradition, but the precision suggests centuries of accumulated knowledge. Labor rhythms also shaped the nocturnal routine. Gardeners often rose after a brief rest following the day's labor, slipping quietly into the moonlit garden. You can almost picture them balancing buckets and clay jugs while avoiding paths slick with dew, moving with a practiced grace honed over years. Work under moonlight demanded alertness and patience. One misstep could crush a budding tulip or spill precious water. Fringe accounts tell of gardeners walking barefoot to better sense the soil's temperature, a method both practical and poetic. Their discipline mirrored a subtle meditation, a blending of physical exertion and mindful presence, which gave these gardens a rhythm both structured and serene. Tools and innovations of night gardening were surprisingly advanced. Perforated clay vessels allowed slow, controlled watering, while small hand-cranked pumps, sometimes powered by gravity, ensured water reached the farthest corners. Stone channels were calibrated with gentle slopes, and small basins collected runoff to minimize waste. Some instruments even reflected moonlight to guide accuracy, a clever adaptation before artificial lighting existed. Historians still debate whether these tools evolved purely from necessity, or if aesthetic considerations, like the way water shimmered in moonlight, played an equal role. You can imagine the faint click of a tilting jug, the soft splash of water into a basin, a nighttime symphony orchestrated with precision and care. Quirky innovations extended to the smallest details. Gardeners would use aromatic herbs along pathways to mask the earthy scent of soil, making each nightly visit a fragrant ritual. Some channels were lined with polished stones to magnify the shimmer of the moonlight, and tiles were arranged to amplify gentle splashes, as if to create a calming soundtrack. Fringe folklore claims that the placement of certain flowers under moonlight could absorb lunar energy, enhancing bloom or scent, though such claims lean more toward poetic imagination than horticultural fact. Still, they reflect the holistic approach. Every sense, every movement, every innovation was considered part of a greater, unified practice. By the time the night reaches its deepest quiet, the garden becomes a living painting under your gaze. The interplay of seasonal timing, disciplined labor, and innovative tools ensures every plant thrives, every channel hums, and every blossom seems to glow under the moonlight. Nod in appreciation, you start to sense that these nocturnal gardeners were not merely tending plants, they were choreographing life itself, balancing practicality, aesthetics, and devotion under the soft, forgiving light of the moon. And as you pause in the cool night air, listening to water ripple and leaves stir, you realize that this delicate dance of moonrise care is both a celebration of nature's rhythm and a testament to human patience and imagination. The influence of Persian moonlit gardening extends far beyond the quiet courtyards and fragrant blooms of medieval Persia. Historical legacy shows that the principles developed here, careful attention to timing, the blending of aesthetics with practicality, and the use of water channels to conserve resources left a lasting mark on Islamic garden design across the Middle East and South Asia. Palaces, mosques, and scholarly institutions adopted similar layouts where water, light, and plant life were orchestrated in harmony. Historians still argue whether the spread of these practices was intentional as a cultural export or simply an organic diffusion through trade and travel. Either way, moonrise watering became a subtle yet enduring signature of Persian influence on global horticulture. Modern echoes of these ancient practices can still be found today. Some contemporary gardeners experiment with nighttime irrigation, particularly in arid climates where evaporation is a concern. You might even see urban rooftop gardens timed with moon phases, or eco-conscious growers who adapt ancient clay channels for slow drip irrigation. Fringe enthusiasts claim that plants respond better under moonlight, a notion more poetic than scientific, yet it nods to a centuries-old intuition about rhythms in nature. Observing these echoes, you begin to appreciate that while techniques evolve, the core philosophy, patience, observation, and harmony with natural cycles remains surprisingly consistent. As the night begins to fade and the first hints of dawn touch the horizon, final reflections emerge. The moonlit garden was never just about watering plants. It was a meditation in motion, a choreography of care and observation that intertwined human effort, celestial guidance, and botanical life. You imagine the gardeners slipping away at the end of their shifts, leaving the garden drenched in dew, fragrant and serene, the soft splash of water replaced by silence. They balanced practicality with artistry, labor with mindfulness, and necessity with poetry, leaving a quiet lesson about living in rhythm with the world around you. Even now, you can take inspiration from these practices. Perhaps it's the idea of paying attention, of finding beauty in small tasks, or of understanding that timing and observation can transform mundane chores into mindful rituals. There's a gentle wisdom here. Life, like the moonlit garden, thrives under care that is deliberate yet unhurried, patient yet observant. Remember the tactile rituals, the aromatic whispers, the carefully guided water, and the playful belief in plants' responsiveness. These are echoes of a philosophy that valued connection over mere output. As the last stars fade, you step back and absorb the full tapestry of the garden. The moon recedes, leaving only the lessons it illuminated: patience, attentiveness, and the quiet poetry of night labor. And though the garden belongs to history, the practices, the rhythms, and the philosophy linger, inviting you to pause, observe, and maybe even water your own world with the same mindful care. The night softens around you. The air, once tinged with the scent of fresh blossoms, now carries a gentle, cooling calm. Every footstep, every rustle of leaves fades into silence as your mind traces the patterns of moonlit gardens, the channels of water glistening in memory. You realize that these nocturnal rituals were more than horticulture. They were a meditation in motion, a dance of patience and observation, a reminder that even the smallest acts can carry profound significance. Imagine the gardeners quietly leaving their posts, footsteps softened by dew-laden paths, each plant perfectly cared for, each channel flowing in harmony. The world feels larger, quieter, more interconnected. Even the moon, now slipping below the horizon, seems to have whispered secrets of rhythm, patience, and the gentle care that sustains life. You might feel a soft smile curve your lips as you envision this quiet devotion, the art of tending not just plants, but the very environment they inhabit. There is a lingering sense of reassurance, a soothing cadence in knowing that balance, attentiveness, and quiet reflection are timeless. The lessons of moonlit watering are not bound to history. They are subtle prompts for your own life. Slow down, observe, and find poetry in routine. Notice the rhythms of nature, the gentle unfolding of petals, the soft splash of water, and let the calm seep into your thoughts. As you drift toward sleep, carry this image with you: a moonlit garden, glistening paths, fragrant blooms, and the quiet, deliberate movements of those who care deeply and mindfully. Let it ease your mind, soften your pace, and invite serenity. Breathe in the night air, imagine the gentle flow of water, and allow your thoughts to settle into the soft, luminous rhythm of history and nature intertwined.